Hello, and thank you for watching the Triangulated Analysis of Read 180 Program B of Vocabulary Development. I'm Alexandra Avila, and I am a master's student at Cal State University of Fullerton. Quick overview, I will briefly describe Read 180. I will then give a triangulated analysis of Read 180 through the lens of vocabulary. We'll talk about the learning theories that influence the program, best practices evident in the program, and standards aligned to the program. Lastly, I will summarize the analysis. So Read 180 is a daily program for struggling readers. It's not considered supplementary, and it is often used in block periods. Program B, which I will discuss, is for middle school grades 6 through 8. A traditional Read 180 instructional period includes 40 minutes of whole class direct instruction led by the teacher working in consumable workbooks, and then 60 minutes of small group rotations. So the class will be divided into thirds. Throughout the presentation, I'll refer to whole group instruction and also refer to small group instruction, in which the students work in consumable workbooks, guided by the teacher, not led by the teacher. Another 20 minutes of students doing the reading rotation, in which they use the Read 180 basal readers as well as high interest but lower lexile novels. And students are also going to have the software rotation, in which they do their adaptive software lessons. Then, of course, there's a 5-minute whole class wrap up to review what students have learned for the day. Essential materials that I'm going to refer to. I'll refer to the R book. So there's a teacher guide to the R book that gives instructions, suggestions, and directions for the teacher who is teaching Read 180. There's also student consumables called R books that include the readings and activities, and that's what I'm going to be referring to mostly. The Read 180 library, like I said, includes basal readers as well as high interest but lower lexile novels, as well as PDFs of quick writes and graphic organizers for each book. There, of course, is also the software element, which is what Read 180 is famous for, including the adaptive lessons, reading inventory, e-reads, and reading quizzes. I'm also going to reference the L books, which are supplementary ELD materials. There is a teacher guide to the L books, and there are also student consumables called L books that provide explicit instruction in language conventions. So without further ado, the actual triangulated analysis of Read 180 Program B. Some learning theories that influence Read 180 are mostly behaviorist, or what I found, because they are across all aspects of the program, whereas other learning theories are only found in some parts of the program. Operant conditioning, which posits that learning occurs not when you learn the whole thing at once, but where you master smaller skills before you move on to the next skill and ultimately can complete the process or learning activity that you are doing, is prevalent in all aspects of Read 180. It is found in the reading rotation, in which students master a novel, take notes on it, then take a quiz before moving on to a higher lexile level. It is found in the adaptive lessons, in which students master specific sub-skills of reading before moving on to more advanced sub-skills, and this is also found in the R book whole group and small group rotations, in which students again master sub-skills before moving on. There is also positive reinforcement after each mastery of sub-skills. Students earn points for mastering skills and raising their lexile level by passing reading quizzes. Students are rewarded with fun activities after they complete activities in the R book. And in the adaptive lessons, there will be colorful pages that say things like, "You did it," as well as a dashboard where students can reference colorful pie charts and graphs demonstrating what they have mastered and what they will work on next. There is also a few constructivist views that are found in Read 180. We see a lot of Vygotsky social constructivism, in which there is a lot of scaffolding involved. Again, Read 180 is for struggling readers, and so there are sentence frames, graphic organizers, modeling, and pretty much extended time on activities to get students to do grade level work, but at a much slower pace and with a lot more assistance. We also see a lot of learning from peers. Students are encouraged to collaborate with each other in small groups and in whole group instruction. We see Rosenblatt's transactional theory of reading also. Students are asked both efferent, which are bottom-up skills, and aesthetic questions, which are top-down skills simultaneously. So on the same page, students are asked to decode a sentence or a word, and then they are also asked to write their reaction, their emotional response to the reading. So we see both efferent and aesthetic questions there, which supports Rosenblatt's transactional theory of reading, in which top-down and bottom-up skills are used simultaneously. We also see schema theory. Students watch videos before every single text they read, both online and in the R book, not so much in the text, but they also have do nows and questions that they answer that alight their schema related to the text. We also see elements of social learning. Bandura's social learning theory obviously includes social learning. There is a heavy use of modeling that is mostly done by the teacher in the R book and small group rotations. There's also modeling in the adaptive lessons. There is a character named Ty. Ty is an actor who shows up and hosts students and guides students. He demonstrates a lot of enthusiasm for reading. We also see gradual release of responsibility. So again, students view a model, which is the teacher element of gradual release of responsibility. And then generally students are weaned off of the scaffolding until they work independently. But first they practice what they have viewed. So they view the teacher model or they view Ty on the adaptive lessons, and then they practice the lessons after synthesizing that information and perfected given feedback of the sub-skills they are mastering. Obviously, we also see from Vygotsky's social constructivism, social learning, in which students learn from their peers. There are also elements of Piaget's theory of cognitive development because activities in Read 180 and high interest readings are appropriate for children who are entering the formal operational phase. So students may be learning vocabulary, they may be learning or vocabulary words that are lower. They may be learning sight words. They maybe are learning the difference between ing and ly, but it is done in a context that is higher for students. There's also the famous mental discipline theory, which is probably everywhere in reading activities and programs. We really like to encourage repeated readings, and Read 180 is no different. Read 180 requires a minimum of 3 readings in the R book, multiple readings in the adaptive lesson, and readings to go back to answer questions in the graphic organizer while students are in the reading rotation. Next, let's discuss best practices of vocabulary development. We see scaffolding of vocabulary development through graphic organizers and questioning and clarifying of vocabulary. We see that, like I discussed before, lower level skills are embedded in higher order thinking skills. An example of this is one of the target words that 6th graders learned in the first workshop is policy. And the word policy they learned is a rule or regulation. Eventually, at the end of the workshop, students have an activity in which they organize a debate about a policy, whether or not students should be required to learn a new language before graduating from middle school. So this is an example of how they embed a lower level skill of learning a fairly basic vocabulary word, but embedding it authentically to accommodate the fact that they are entering the formal operational phase. We also see explicit instruction in new vocabulary that happens constantly. Students are introduced to 5 words at the beginning of a workshop and 5 more words as they read more text. This isn't including the vocabulary words they read in the Read 180 books, and it doesn't include the vocabulary words that they encounter in the adaptive lessons. But in the R book, the teacher pronounces the word. It is syllabicated as well. It is defined in kid-friendly language, which students write, It is given an example of which students write. It is encountered authentically in the text, and at the end of the workshop, it is assessed. And by then, students normally have a good grasp of it. In the meanwhile, students are also building word consciousness of these vocabulary words through games that are also found in the R book. We also have the teaching of dictionary use. There is wide reading through the Read 180 books, which both teaching dictionaries and wide reading alone are not excellent vocabulary builders, but they certainly help teach students a useful tool, and the wide reading certainly helps with their exposure. And as I hinted at before, there's just a battery of vocabulary that students are exposed to, which are essential for struggling readers. While there are several best practices, there are some that are only evident in the L books, the ELD supplementary materials. Clustering organizers in which students make associations through connectionism are only found in the L books, as are word families, structural analysis, and even more consciousness building activities. So there's not so much morphemic analysis and studying specific affixes and root words as I would like in the R book. They are mostly found for the English language development learners in the L book. There are dozens of standards associated with a singular workshop that are Common Core state standard aligned. So just focusing on the vocabulary, there's determining the words and phrases as they are used in a text. There's comprehending literary nonfiction, including comprehending the vocabulary words. There's developing, strengthening writing, and revising, which I include because Read 180 has a very specific revision process that including higher academic vocabulary, which they call precise vocabulary. So there's an active step in which students incorporate higher academic register vocabulary through the revision process. Students need to demonstrate spelling commands of the vocabulary, which are included in the language standards. We also have determining the meanings of unknown and multiple meaning words. As you can see, there's many ways that students can do this through context, studying affixes, studying reference materials like dictionaries, and verifying the preliminary determination of the meaning of a word or word phrase by inference. We also have demonstrating understanding of figurative language, word relationships, and nuances in word meanings, as well as acquiring and accurately using grade level and general academic and domain specific words and phrases. So all of these are found explicitly in Read 180, with the exception of what I highlighted, which I will describe a moment later. I want to point out that the workshop 1, which is titled The New Americans, deals only in informational text, and that is the reason why reading for literature standards are missing from this list, and only reading for information and language standards are found here, as well as writing, because there is no reading for literature. But I know that later on, when we reach workshop 3, then we begin reading for literature vocabulary. These standards that I highlighted, like I said before, are not represented as often as the others. Read 180 does claim that these are found in the workshop, but like I said before, they are mostly found in the L books. So determining words and phrases, that's a pretty vague one, and I think it's further clarified in this next one. Determine or clarify the meaning of unknown and multiple meaning words and phrases through the following examples. There is in the L books the use of the explicit instruction and use of affixes and roots as clues to the meaning of the word. There's a specific context clue procedure that students are taught, and their inference and consulting of reference materials is found in the R book, but is again further expounded upon in the L book. So oftentimes when I'm teaching the R book, I find that I refer back to teaching affixes, that I teach a context clue procedure because that's missing from the regular Read 180 R book lesson. In sum, I included this because that is one of the many transitional phrases that students are explicitly taught in the vocabulary aspect of Read 180. Read 180 Program B is overall an effective program, particularly in vocabulary development for struggling readers, as it is grounded in multiple research-based theories, behaviorist and constructivist namely. It provides many instructional opportunities that are considered best practices, and it is aligned with Common Core state standards. Some weaknesses do appear, but those are in fact covered by the English Language Development supplementary materials. So my ELD learners for sure are receiving this in both the Read 180 ELAW class and the English Language Development class. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't go over my time, and I appreciate you watching this.